when I talk to a scientist on a podcast, there's no cutting out. I mean, they have to tell their own story, basically. And so what I'm finding that I do is I will interrupt in a way to sort of implicitly remind people, you know, you're not just talking to the people in your department. There are other people listening in. So why don't you define that term you just used? It's fascinating, and I'm not sure where it's going to go, but it's been great to be working with scientists who really are enthusiastic about exploring this. On the other hand, there are plenty of scientists who are not so interested in getting involved. I have encountered many scientists and read comments by scientists and comment threads where they said, you know, I had a couple of terrible experiences with the press, and I'm never going to talk to a reporter again. I'm never going to do anything. I'm just going to go do my science. That's what I'm going to do. And, you know, I'm sympathetic to this kind of bunker mentality. I mean, you just have to look at the kind of stuff that's out there. So this is what passes for microbiology at the Huffington Post. This is some New Age individual who was writing about swine flu. And she wrote, don't be fooled when it comes to this conversation about the swine flu. This swine flu wasn't created on the level of the body because no disease is. It was created on the level of the mind, and it is there that we will root it out at the causal level. Okay, so you can laugh now, and then I'll show you the next slide. Okay, so the Huffington Post, where this was published, is the model for the future of journalism. So you can expect a lot more of that stuff in the future. Now, you know, I can understand, again, you know, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, I mean, it certainly makes sense that you might feel this way. And there are other issues, so vaccines, for example, or creationism. There's another issue where it just sort of makes you want to go back to your lab and not deal with it. But the thing is that I just don't think that ultimately hiding in the bunker is a viable thing to do. If you don't tell your story, or if you don't help tell your story, somebody else will. And they're going to tell a story about how swine flu is just in your mind. That's going to go on. And it's going to get worse if you're not involved. Now, just to finish up, I just wanted to give kind of an illustration of what I'm talking about. And it goes back actually to Richard Lenski. And so I blogged about some of Lenski's most recent work, which was really remarkable. So, as I had mentioned before, he has shown that over 50,000 generations, there has been a steady, gradual increase in fitness in these bacteria that are living on a very limited diet of glucose. But in one flask, something very weird happened, which is that the E. coli in there evolved to eat citrate. And I don't need to tell the E. coli experts in the audience that one of the definitions of E. coli as a species is that it can't eat citrate. So effectively, he may have seen the evolution of a new species happening right in front of his nose. And what's amazing is that he's been freezing these bacteria every 500 generations. He can go back and thaw them out, and his students can thaw them out, and they can figure out what were the genetic changes that led to this dramatic shift in these bacteria. Well, this caused a lot of creationists to get very disturbed. One place where they were very disturbed was at a website, I don't know if you've heard of it, called Conservapedia, which is, for those of you who think Wikipedia is too liberal. I'm not kidding. This place gets millions of hits. It is an extremely popular site. And I first came to learn about it because someone said, hey, did you know you're on Conservapedia? I said, what are you talking about? And apparently I am cited in their entry for parasites, which explains how viruses and other parasites are really actually just evidence of the fall of man. And then they cite me for some reason as evidence of that. And then they tell you to also go look under the entry of homosexuality and parasites, because homosexuality is a big issue at Conservapedia. So Conservapedia is basically the brainchild of Andrew Schlafly, the son of Phyllis Schlafly, the opponent of the ERA amendment in the 1970s. And Andrew Schlafly is considered a leading figure in the conservative homeschooling movement. So he wrote Lenski a letter demanding all the evidence from the paper that he published about this transformation into a new species. I mean, basically what he was trying to do is he was trying to create a story, kind of a climate gate for evolution, that Lenski was a fraud. And here was Lenski doing experiments with taxpayers' dollars, and so he was obligated to turn over all of his evidence. This work was taxpayer-funded, and PNAS represents that its authors will make underlying data available. I'd like to review the data myself and ensure availability for others, including experts and my students. Others have expressed interest in access to the data, in addition to myself, and your website seems well-suited for public release of these data. If they're voluminous, then I particularly request access to the data made available to peer reviewers of your paper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this was actually his second request. Lenski had sort of politely explained why this wasn't going to work the first time around. This was his second letter. So here's Lenski is faced with a situation. What does he do? Does he go into the bunker? Does he feel like, I can't deal with this? I'm a scientist. I'm going to go deal with my science, and I'm going to let other people tell the story? Well, fortunately, no. He didn't just stay in the bunker. So what he did was he wrote a letter back to Schlafly and then made sure that it was widely distributed on blogs and put on public sites. This is his second letter. I'll just read it to you because it's awesome. I tried to be polite, civil, and respectful in my reply to your first email, despite its rude tone and uninformed content. Given the continued rudeness of your second email and the willfully ignorant and slanderous content on your website, my second response will be less polite. I expect you to post my response in its entirety. If not, I will make sure that it is made publicly available through other channels. I offer this lengthy reply because I am an educator as well as a scientist. It is my sincere hope that some readers might learn something from this exchange, even if you do not. Now, I'm not going to show the whole letter, but I will show one more excerpt, which is near the end. You seem not to understand that we actually have the actual living bacteria that exhibit the properties reported in our paper, including both the ancestral strain used to start this long-term experiment and its evolved citrate-using descendants. In other words, it is not that we claim to glimpse, quote, a unicorn in the garden. We have a whole population of them living in my lab. And lest you accuse me for further of fraud, I do not literally mean that we have unicorns in the lab. Rather, I am making a literary illusion. Well, I have to say that this is fantastic chasm jumping. This is chasm jumping of the first order. And I'd like to point something out, that this was not written in jargon. This was not written all in the passive voice. This was written for something that anybody could read and appreciate and learn from. It was passionate, and it was eloquent, and it was hugely successful. Millions of people read this, literally. Lenski told me later that he was amazed that he got nothing but positive responses. He got emails from all over the world from people who had read this and then had gone to read about his stuff. So people who didn't know about his work before now knew about it, and they knew about it as it really is, and not as it was being portrayed by those who wanted to use it for their own ideological ends. So I congratulate Lenski on leaping this chasm. I invite you to do so as well. And thank you again for having me.